All right. I hereby call the 2,266th meeting of the Milwaukee City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first up we have the National Child Abuse Prevention Month proclamation. It will be introduced by our chief, Steve Bartol, and Tom Soma, the Executive Director of Clackamas Children's Center.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for having us tonight. Looks like you've got a full house tonight, so I'll try and keep my comments brief. But just to say that, really it's horrible that we have to set aside a month to recognize and bring to light this issue, or at least keep it on people's forefront. As you guys well know, I worked a lot of these cases as a general assignment detective and a detective sergeant back in the day, and we've really appreciated having the Children's Center as a partner in this. These folks, they're really the warriors in this forefront. They got a whole center that's set up specifically for the victims and to kind of really help them navigate through this whole system. The work they do there is just absolutely amazing. And we would not be able to be as successful as we are in prosecuting these cases if we did not have this group of people and these clinicians that do this job there. So I thought it was kind of fit and right to bring them to kind of tell you a little bit about the center and the work that they do with Tom's team. And so with that, I'll just kind of step out of the way and let him do his thing.
Thanks.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Mayor and councilors. Really appreciate the opportunity to be back with you this year. I would just like to invite people to come into Children's Center for a couple of minutes, and that's what I'm going to do, and then I'll talk very briefly.
Okay.
Should be sound. Sorry. Something.
Copying that and a part of the hope
Yeah, go ahead.
for children.
It's not much. Thanks.
When issues of abuse and trauma are not addressed, they can have lasting effects on a child and ripple effects throughout families and societies. We get to be a part of stopping that and a part of the hope for children to grow and to heal and for change to happen.
They do the work that many people don't want to see. They care for children who have been seriously violated, and they do it with great care, with great love, with great hope. They're the ones who intervene. They enable a child to believe that things can be different.
We are in a unique position to provide families a place that is different than other places and services maybe they have already received or are receiving.
It's very child-focused, meaning that our physical setting is all about children in the waiting areas. We have toys, videos, games that are all very child-friendly. The appointment is for the child. And so, like in the evaluation, we will come out and greet the child first, if culturally appropriate, and talk with the child and let them know that they're in charge.
The child is in control of their body and they have say over what happens to their body because we want them to feel like they have that control because they may have not had that control based on the situation that they're coming in for.
When law enforcement encounters these events, it's not a frequent event for an individual officer. So it might be the first time that they've ever come across this that they have to interview a child. And to get that healing process started with a child, we need to start it with the right interview. We need to start it with the right exam. We need to start it with the professional staff here at the Children's Center to make sure that the child's best interests are at the forefront of everything we do.
This service is so important for our community because of what it offers for our children's futures. We don't want these children to be defined by the abuse that happened to them.
want to second what Steve said at the outset.
Teacher, I know it doesn't always seem like
It's horrible that we have to have a child. Sorry. It's horrible that we have to have Child Abuse Prevention Month. But why do we have to have it? Last year I was here, same time, and I gave you a few numbers. One of them was 834. That's how many centers there are in the United States. This year, 854. Last year, those centers served 324,000 kids. This year, 344,000 kids. 20 more centers, 20,000 more kids in 1 year. That's why we have to have Child Abuse Prevention Month. We saw here in Clackamas County 462 kids out of 511 founded cases of child abuse and neglect. Those numbers are terrible. But until we call people's attention to them enough and get it to stop, we're going to have to continue having things like this. I want to thank you for what you're doing to call attention to the issue, and I want to invite you all to join us for a teddy bear picnic open house at the center on Thursday, April 26th from 3 to 6 p.m. Bring a teddy bear, because we're going to do a photo op. We want to collect 462 teddy bears or other stuffed animals, because every child, as you notice there, gets a bear in a blanket or a stuffed animal in a blanket. And we're going to take a picture of 462 stuffed animals just to make a point of all the people that we're seeing. So thank you again.
Can you be sure to get us an actual emailed invitation to that so that we can get it on our calendars?
Yep.
Thank
we'll
you.
do that tomorrow.
Yeah, I would strongly encourage you guys, if you have an opportunity, to go take a tour of the center. It is it's amazing the work, the front-end work that goes into how they take care of these kids, and they go through the process. Until you kind of see it, you don't really kind of understand all the work that goes into it. And not to turn this into a commercial, but a lot of their support is done through fundraising. So if you watch for these events, and if you're a person out there that has the ability to give to different things, this is an organization that is really worth investing in, and will actually make a really big difference in how they do that. So I would encourage that as well.
$2.4 million budget last year. Over $1 million is coming from fundraising. So government sources and insurance covers only $1.4 million. We couldn't do the work we are doing without the contributions of about 1,000 people. So thank you again.
Thank you for the work you do, both of you.
Yeah.
I look forward to the day when we don't have to see you anymore.
Me too.
I'm going to read the proclamation. Whereas child abuse is a tragedy that impacts the well-being of all, and whereas child abuse prevention programs require strong community partnerships, and whereas child abuse prevention requires a public commitment to create safe and nurturing environments for parents and guardians to raise their children, and whereas this community recognizes that children are our most valuable and vulnerable resources and are key to our prosperity and quality of life, and whereas by providing a healthy environment for our children, free of violence, abuse, and neglect, we can help ensure that Milwaukee's children will grow to their full potential. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Mark Gamba, Mayor of the City of Milwaukee, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas and the State of Oregon, do hereby proclaim April 2018 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in Milwaukee, and call upon all citizens to work to prevent child abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next up, we have National Volunteer Month, a proclamation, and this will be introduced by Assistant City Manager Kelly Brooks.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Kelly Brooks. I'm Assistant City Manager. And as you all know, we couldn't do much of what we do in this city without the amazing volunteers that put in countless hours to help make Milwaukee a great place to live. And one of the ways that we help recognize that effort is by awarding a Volunteer of the Year. So each year, the City of Milwaukee and the City Council recognize a Milwaukee resident who has made a significant contribution to the community during the past year as Volunteer of the Year. 6 people were nominated this year, including Ray Bryan, Lisa Gunyon-Rinker, Linda Hedges, Greg Heemer, Julie Tanz, and Yvonne Tyler. While it was a difficult decision, City Council chose Lisa Gunyon-Rinker as Milwaukee's 2017 Volunteer of the Year. Lisa was formally recognized and thanked at the Volunteer Recognition Dinner last Thursday, March 29th, alongside almost 100 of her peers at Bob's Red Mill. Her name is now engraved on a plaque in the lobby of City Hall, and she is in the front page of this month's pilot newsletter. Lisa's actually here tonight. I thought she wasn't going to be, and I was going to read a quote from her, which I've now promised I won't read a quote from her in front of her. But in my brief time with the city, I've had the great opportunity to work with Lisa in her role as chair of our Parks Board, and have just been continually impressed with how selfless she is, how much she really genuinely cares about all the people that serve with her and the parks that all citizens here enjoy. So it's really been an honor. I look forward to getting to know her better as I continue my role here in the city. One thing I have learned in the short term is she really hates attention. So she asked me not to make her come up here tonight, but I did say that I would make her stand up. She's not standing up. Congratulations, Lisa, and thank you for giving so much of yourself to help make Milwaukee a wonderful place for the rest of us to enjoy. Before the mayor reads the proclamation, though, I just want to let you all know that there's a great opportunity to volunteer on the horizon. The 2018 Milwaukee Earth Day event is going to be held on Saturday, April 21st from 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. at Baumichel Park. Volunteers will clean up the park, neighborhood streets, and a portion of the Springwater corridor nearby. After the cleanup, you can participate in the Arbor Day celebration from 12 to 1:30 p.m., and that's going to include kids' activities, ceremonial tree planting, and a tree giveaway. And even more exciting things are still in the works. If you want to register to volunteer at that event, you can just go to the Milwaukee homepage at milwaukeeoregon.gov. And very, very last but not least, I'm here tonight because Jason Wax couldn't be. He's our community programs coordinator, and he does a great job engaging with all of our volunteers and volunteers-to-be. So I just want to recognize his efforts as well. And with that, that's it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, on the Arbor Day thing, since you brought it up, we had trees left over last year, so free trees. Come get trees.
And they're good sized trees.
Nice little trees, yeah. All right. Whereas an engaged community can inspire action to change the world, and whereas an inspired community relies upon countless volunteers to provide service opportunities through government agencies and nonprofit organizations, and whereas National Volunteer Week was established in 1974 and has grown exponentially each year with thousands of volunteer projects and special events throughout the week. And whereas on Saturday, April 21st, 2018, the Milwaukee community will have an opportunity to come together for the annual Earth Day event. Now, therefore, I, Mark Gamba, Mayor of the City of Milwaukee, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the State of Oregon, do hereby proclaim April 15th through 21st, 2018 as National Volunteer Week, and encourage all members of our community to make Milwaukee a cleaner and healthier place. Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Lisa.
And I think in addition to the Earth Day and the Arbor event, it seems like in the Milwaukee pilot we have a few boards and commissions still that have some openings, so
Yeah.
just can't remember
Lots
which
of them,
ones.
and they're constant. So if people are interested in serving, we would strongly recommend that they go onto our website and look at our current vacancy. Scott is actually in charge of recruiting, so.
I think we currently have an opening on the Design and Landmarks Committee, possibly one coming on the Budget Committee.
Yes.
And
We do have
we do have one on the Budget Committee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Okay, we have one on Budget Committee.
Which this will be a big year for the Budget Committee because we're doing the budget.
Yes, Design Landmark Committee. Cal, Good Neighbor, we're in the middle of wrapping up. There's a fourth one, Tree Board.
That's right. We have a new opening on the tree board. All right. Next up is the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda includes the minutes of the February 27th, 2018 special session, the March 6, 2018 work session, the March 6, 2018 regular session, a resolution appointing Sarah Busicchio and Joe Gillock to the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, a resolution acting as the local contract review board authorizing a personal services contract with Angelo Planning Group for services relating to policy and analysis and neighborhood hub assistance for the comprehensive plan update. A resolution awarding a contract for a roof replacement at the city facility located at 40th and Harvey at a cost of $114,984, and a resolution in support of eliminating zones within the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District for the purposes of System Development Charge Fund distribution. Does any member of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to remove the March 6, 2018 regular session minutes, please.
All righty. Anything else? All right, then I would entertain a motion to that effect.
I move to approve the consent agenda with item A3, the March 6, 2018 regular session minutes removed.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve tonight's consent agenda minus item A3, the March 6, 2018 regular session minutes. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Do we need to talk about that?
The only thing I have are very quick, but we can also
I think we can just give them to anybody who has any edits to those minutes, just give them to Scott. And
Bring it back at the next meeting.
there were just some questions about whether it quite accurately captured the discussion about the North Milwaukee Industrial.
I went through that after I saw your email, and there were a couple areas where I was having a little trouble, so having more time would be important.
Good.
Because I wasn't sure about a couple of the things.
A quick question on that. Is the official record of the meeting the minutes, or is it the video?
Minutes.
It is the minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The videos are a convenience copy of the meeting, and we retain them for a year. We have to retain them for a year, but once the official minutes are adopted, that's the record of the meeting.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, audience participation. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear citizen statements regarding city business. Those wishing to speak must fill out a green speaker card available on the table in the hall and identify agenda item number 4, audience participation. As council has other business items on the agenda this evening, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. So, seriously, 3 minutes. Because of the information provided during the public comment may be new to some councilors, the city manager will respond at the next council meeting to those comments that require follow-up. Before we begin, are there any follow-up reports from the March 20th, 2018 audience participation? Ms. Ober.
So there are 2 discussions. One is that we had a couple of constituents who came in with code items. So we've addressed those, and we're working with the appropriate staff. And I've been in communication with both sets of constituents. But that's really all we have at this time. The second piece is that several weeks ago, there was discussion about a bag ban that was brought before council and a styrofoam ban that was brought before council. And I've talked to several of you offline, but the short answer is that the way the ordinances are drafted, it would require a significant amount of staff oversight in order to implement those at this time. And the individuals that would be required to implement them are people that we have very active on other projects. So for instance, it would be Peter Passarelli, who's our Public Works Director and running the tree programming as well as the Climate Action Plan. Tim Sawyers, who's doing several code issues right now. And then Alma Flores, because these would be businesses that we would be working on. Those individuals are working on some very large projects today, quite literally. So we are not comfortable saying that we could achieve that within the timeliness needed. However, We do have an alternative if council is interested, and if you are, we can bring it back. And that is that we could target this on some of the largest retailers within the city, especially for the bag ban. And we could come back to you with a staff report if you're interested in targeting those retailers. And that would be something we could address immediately. Is that of interest?
Do you need direction now? Yeah, I'm interested in the large retailers for the bag ban.
Yes.
Perfect. Then we will be back.
At least a staff report and some discussion about it.
Yeah, I'd like us to have a discussion. I guess I hate to see us, there's some middle ground between just the larger, I don't know. To me, it's the mom and pops, the mom and pop sort of convenience stores that are going to be a big issue, so.
And when we bring this, we can also tell you which projects are going to be offset. So part of this is that right now we're working on the tree ordinance. That's Peter Passarelli, and that's a large amount of his extra time. This would replace that time. And those are things that we've been making commitments to you and to the community about as well, and we don't want to offset those. So we're really trying to come up with something that we feel like gives you the ability to move, which, this has been a discussion in our community for a long time. While simultaneously respecting constraints that we have with our current staffing levels. I hear you, totally. But you'll probably hear me saying I don't think that we can get to those at this point.
So anyway, I think we're all interested in having that as a conversation.
Then we will be back probably in May, but it may be June just based on budget.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a small need. I don't have a water cup over here. Is there any?
Actually, there weren't any here. I got mine from the other room, so I didn't realize I could have done that.
Okay. So, you all got that about the 3 minutes, yes? All right.
Explain how
it'll start flashing yellow when there's 30 seconds left, and it'll beep when the 3 minutes is up. So finish your sentence or maybe your paragraph, and then you're done. All right, so up first, Robin Pooley. And state your name and city of residence.
I'm Robin Pooley. I live in Milwaukee. A little nervous. As a renter, I feel extremely vulnerable to losing my home because of decisions made by landlords. I was living in a 3-bedroom triplex with my 4 kids and partner before I was forced to move. I don't know what the issue was. They never told me. I have to assume that they thought they could get more rent from someone else. Milwaukee's low vacancy rates, increasing rents, and no-cause evictions are displacing people and leaving them without options or resources to find a new home. I loved where I lived, but for a little over $1,400, my partner and I were barely able to afford the rent as it was. When we tried to look for a new place to live, we were disappointed. The other 3-bedroom apartments and houses were $1,700 to $1,900 in Milwaukee. We spent a lot of money on applications, research, and went through a lot of stress, wondering if we would have somewhere to go in less than the month we were given to move out. Today, I am living with my ex-partner, but that is just a short-term solution. I still haven't found an affordable alternative. I live in fear that my family and I will become a statistic. Every child deserves the right to a secure home, and for some time, I was worried my kids would be one of the 400 children in Milwaukee that experienced homelessness last year. I didn't want to take them out of the schools they've grown up in. Milwaukee has become so expensive, I may have to move further out and away from my children's schools, which would have meant a long commute for me to keep them stable in their education. It has been difficult and time-consuming to find anything affordable, and I'm worried that under current law, I could be kicked out of my next home at any moment. I don't have the funds to move again, and I certainly don't want to put my kids through it again. I really want to stay in Milwaukee. This is where I want to raise my children. This is why I believe that the city of Milwaukee should pass relocation assistance for families like mine who are part of this community.
And Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So you were no cause evicted?
It wasn't an eviction. It was a no-fault lease termination, and I was given like less than 30-day notice. So
It's not the same thing?
it's not the same.
It sounds like the same thing, and less than 30 days.
Effectively the same thing.
No matter what your lease says.
So were you on a month-to-month or something?
No, it was a year lease, and
your year was up?
And my year was going to be up, and I had like a month notice. Like there was no negotiation, and I wasn't told why. It just said a no-fault lease termination and gave me the date I needed to move out by. So I had to scramble to find a place in that short amount of time, and I wasn't able to. So I had to move in with my soon-to-be ex-husband.
Okay. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
Laura Kirk.
Hello, my name is Laura Kirk, and I'm a resident of the city of Milwaukee. I was actually born and raised here. I've been living in the same duplex for the last 8 years with no issues. My rent was originally $750 a month when I moved in. This included all of my utilities. About 2 years ago, it was raised to $850 a month. That was a lot to take in, but disaster really struck when my landlord sold the property just recently. The new landlord increased my rent to $1,000 a month, and on top of this, I now have to pay for my water, my sewer, and my garbage. April's my second month paying this rent increase, and I've always lived paycheck to paycheck. This last rent increase makes it more impossible to make my ends meet. In order to afford my 2-bedroom apartment in Milwaukee, a minimum wage worker would have to work 93 hours a week. While I'm a marketing manager for a nonprofit, I'm the sole provider for my 2 children. Even on my income, I don't have enough money for basic necessities for myself or my children. I have no budget for food or even laundry soap until the 15th of this month. In Clackamas County, 1 in 4 of us are paying more than half of our income towards our rent. That's my reality. Because of the rent increase, I pulled my kids from daycare on Fridays to save money. My family stepped up, and they've helped me with other expenses. I depend on community resources to help with the cost of food and clothing for my children. Trying to find something more affordable is not an option. I don't want to move my children to another city or an unfamiliar neighborhood. I've grown up here. Even if I was able to find something that was less expensive every month, I don't have any money to move. I don't have enough money saved up to move even if I wanted to. I know the housing crisis is real in Milwaukee, as my family has been affected by it firsthand. That's why I'm urging the city of Milwaukee to pass reasonable policies to provide stability for renters. When there are huge rent increases like I have faced, or when people are evicted through no fault of their own, tenants need help for relocation. Something needs to change, and local officials have the power to do something about the issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This will be coming up at the next legislative session, at the very least. There will be another shot at what we tried to do in the last long session around giving cities the opportunity to do rent control and things like that. Stories like these, testimony like this is key to getting those bills passed. So please stay tuned to that process. I'm not saying this nothing will happen here. I'm just saying for sure that's going to be happening. So I would personally ask you to help us when we get ready to advocate for those bills in the next session, all right? So let's see. Boy, I'm going to take a guess here. Levi DeSitter?
Oh, Lewis.
Lewis, I'm sorry.
Okay. Hey, I'm Louis DeSitter. I work for SEIU, and I'm actually reading one of our members, Steve's, who lives in Milwaukee's story. He wanted to come today, and then about half an hour ago, feared retaliation, which is a very real thing that a lot of people live with. I will start, though, by briefly addressing your point about the legislature, Mr. Mayor, and we do appreciate that, and we do look forward to fighting alongside you guys for statewide legislation. However, their failure to act this last time has put pressure on people like Steve and like Laura and like Robin that simply can't wait for another year to 18 months. So Steve has been living at the same house in Milwaukee for nearly 8 years. He and his partner and their son live in a home, and I'm going to go into first person for him because otherwise it's too hard for me to read. We had to move a friend to help us pay for rent and increase. This helped us make it by, but our friend is moving out soon, and we have no idea what will happen if we don't have enough money to pay our rent when he leaves in a couple of months. In 2015, our landlord increased our rent by 28%, which was an increase of up to $1,700 a month. Luckily, we convinced them not to increase it by quite that much, but this leaves us with little to no money left over for necessities like food, medicine, and other basics. We don't have enough money for our rent as it is, and we certainly don't have enough money to relocate. We live at the whim of our landlord. This is why I'm here today, to urge City of Milwaukee to consider relocation assistance ordinance to protect Milwaukee renters. Hardworking people in Milwaukee, and frankly all Oregon, are finding rent increasingly out of reach. I'm an Army veteran. After serving our country, I was self-employed maintenance professional in Portland. I was at this job when I got into an accident. I fell 2 stories down from a parking structure at PDX where I broke both my legs, heels, ankles, and my right foot. My left leg is full of screws and plates. I deal with chronic pain daily. Now my income is Social Security disability insurance, but that's not enough to pay the rent. Because of the gap in my income and what I need to afford rent, I'm also a part-time caregiver to my partner. She had a stroke a little over a year ago, and now she's in a wheelchair and has trouble speaking. She took care of me for 10 years, and now roles have shifted. I'm glad I can support her, but this is tiring work for me. Our son Tyler has been through a lot. He has also experienced my fall, his mother's stroke, and now could be facing homelessness. Tyler, who is 15, has been a part of Milwaukee School District all his life. My wife, Virginia, graduated from Milwaukee High School, and she is currently in the 1980s yearbook that is in the Milwaukee Museum. Our family is part of Milwaukee's history, and it's a shame that we are the ones impacted most by those rent increases. We would not survive homelessness or displacement. It's been 2 years since the city of Milwaukee declared a housing emergency. Since then, our community continues to struggle with high rent and no-cause evictions. Landlords are gouging their prices, and it has left many people on the street. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, how much do you have left?
He's got it here.
2 sentences.
Go for it.
I'm worried that this will be my family soon. No one should have to worry about rent increases displacing their family. I'm hopeful the city of Milwaukee will consider tenant protection laws to help people like me and my family.
Thank you, Louis.
Thank you. Thanks for reading that for him, Louis.
Pan Fem.
Good evening. Thank you so much, City Council. I just wanted to also clarify, my name is Pam Fawn. I'm with Community Alliance Attendants. And just the distinction between a no-fault lease termination and a no-cause eviction. Essentially, the no-fault termination is what is the notification that's given to a tenant on their door. And the eviction comes if you end up going to eviction court to go through small claims. And so if council is interested, Community Alliance Attendants is happy to walk you through kind of the distinctions of those pieces of landlord-tenant law if needed.
Yeah, that's a conversation that I think we should have to see if there's something we need to change about, or if we can change our, at least our delay, so it gives people a shot at finding something.
Yeah, absolutely. So tonight, I was asked by one of our members, Julie Feeney, to read her statement, and I can do so quickly. In June 2017, we were served with a no-cause eviction after 18 months paying the rent on the first of every month. Our landlord had the house foundation raised in November of 2016, which caused the front door and several windows to not close properly, leaving a 2-inch gap on the top of our front door. After waiting 6 months to have the work completed, Clackamas Housing suggested giving the landlord a 30-day deadline and citing a no landlord retaliation law. The day after construction, workers installed a new door and windows, and we were served with a no-cause eviction. After a very cold winter and waiting patiently for repairs to be made, we were completely unprepared for the surprise eviction. We did not have any money saved for the application fees, first, last month's rent, and finally a deposit. It was very stressful to be told that we had to move when we had done nothing to warrant getting evicted. We were quiet, kept to ourselves, had paid rent on time, and took care of the property. We were forced to move from a house to a fourplex, which was all that we were able to afford, and it was not an ideal living environment. I could not imagine if this had happened again without cause. We had no place to go, no money saved, and totally unprepared to move again. It's scary to know that it doesn't matter if we are good tenants, or if we pay on time, or whatever, that we as tenants can be retaliated against for asking for repairs, inform a landlord about issues about their property, or for any reason they choose. I don't know where we would live if my current landlord chose to give us a no-cause eviction because of my current health concerns, living above a long-term smoker. I was told that I don't have the right to breathe fresh air by my landlord, and I do not have to, although I do not have the right to move, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Robin Troch.
Reading the instructions. Good evening, counselors and mayor. My name is Robin Trokey, and I teach over at Milwaukee High School. And it's my privilege to serve as the president of the North Clackamas Education Association. Earlier this year, I was grateful for the support that this city council gave Northwest Housing Alternatives in pursuing an expanded property tax exemption for affordable housing units across from the high school. Thank you. But adding a handful of affordable units isn't enough. For a few years, I've been teaching here in the district since 2001. I started over at Milwaukee Middle School, which is now the Waldorf School. And I can tell you, for a few years, we had an overwhelming scramble for us to try to connect families with resources when layoffs and foreclosures disrupted lives. Some months in 2009 and 2010, we had multiple families shifting between apartments along Highway 99 as eviction notices prompted relocations. And coordinating school transfers or adjusting transportation services was often only one detail in a very long list for a family who are applying for a full slate of social services. But it was an important step in minimizing the trauma experienced by children. Unfortunate benefit of the Great Recession was it provided us with a wealth of research on the impacts of housing instability on children's health and educational achievement. Education Weekly's 2016 article on student mobility confirms what we would suspect. One, the impact falls most heavily on children in rental housing. And two, for students whose education is disrupted 4 times or more before they reach high school, they accumulate a deficit of over a year. And that's to say nothing of the accumulated stress and anxiety triggered by each event. The number of students and families facing food and housing instability here in the area has stabilized, but it's not continuing to improve. And in fact, Portland State's projections have the Milwaukee area school attendance dropping in terms of the next decade as families are pushed out of the area because of a lack of housing. Milwaukee should be a place where everyone can find safe, secure, affordable housing across income levels. Unfortunately, that's not true. In the 2 years since the city of Milwaukee declared a housing emergency, we continue to struggle with high rents, we continue to struggle with no-cause evictions, and the vacancy rate is so tight, below 4%, that there's no place for people to go. The problem now is there's simply nowhere left to move to. Not here, not in Milwaukee, where the district could provide adjusted transportation and keep a child in the same stable classroom setting. It's probably not even possible to stay in the county. Not when for every 100 very low-income families, there are only 19 affordable units. What are the nearly 400 children here in the Milwaukee area to do?
How much do you have left?
I can cut it to one sentence.
Okay.
Okay. There's an opportunity for us to build on the momentum that we started in February. And I appreciate so much the leadership you guys have already shown. And as a teacher, I've seen the difference it can make for our students. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we've been handing stuff out. You may have noticed. We have a forum where we are talking to different groups separately to give everybody a safe space. So we're actually doing a tenant forum, and I believe it is on April 16th? April 12th. So if you are interested, Alma has flyers. We'd actually love to have, we're asking for tenants. We need the individuals who are actually going through it to be present so that they can answer specific questions, but we promise to keep that information confidential.
Are advocates welcome to join, who come attend with?
If you don't speak, yes, but the concern that we've had is that we need the individuals to represent their experience and what they're actually feeling and facing instead of having it come through other voices. So we've really been trying to create a safe space for individuals to speak for themselves and to empower them to be their own force.
Translation services?
Yeah.
So there's also going to, I'm trying to convene another process here in a month or two, a roundtable. And I would appreciate it if you could be involved in that. Okay.
And then the final piece that I'm just going to add, and I said this once before to council after our last set of individuals came forward, is we are working on our housing strategic plan. This is a part of that discussion. We are going through these forms to be able to gather information about what all different groups are facing and how we maybe solve this problem together as a team. So we will be bringing that before council over the course of the next 2 months.
All right. Kathy, why?
Good evening, councilors and Mayor Gambo. My name is Kathy Way, and I'm here today to speak in favor of relocation assistance policies from the city of Milwaukee. So I'm currently a school board member for the North Clackamas School District, and like many other school districts, we often hear too many stories from our students and their families about their encounters with homelessness and displacement. Nearly 400 students were counted as homeless in our most recent survey. As last month's Oregonian investigation showed, when children are displaced, it can have a profound impact on them academically, emotionally, and socially. As you can imagine, it's difficult to keep up with your homework when you're commuting hours every day to and from school and home. As the investigation found, children of color and children in families that are low incomes are also disproportionately affected. So this is also an issue around equity. Housing stability is also really a personal issue for me. I have experienced the effects of displacement firsthand. I grew up in Oregon and have lived in this area in Clackamas County with my family for over 10 years. Our house was foreclosed during the economic recession, and our family of 5 suddenly had to find an affordable place to rent. My parents really wanted to stay in this district so that my younger siblings can attend the same school without their learning being disrupted. Luckily, we found a place that was less than 5 minutes away from their elementary school, and my parents were able to move into the new place, but only with financial help from relatives and friends. My siblings were able to continue their learning in the same elementary school, and today they are proud graduates of our school district. My family just got really lucky because we had the help of our relatives and friends. But too many families were not as lucky as ours and cannot afford the moving costs that would allow them to keep their kids in their home schools. And that's why this issue is so important. I do commend you for some of the work that you're already doing to address the affordable housing crisis, but it is not enough, as you have heard from many of our community members. As you may recall, very most recently, our North Clackamas School Board voted for a property tax exemption, allowing Northwest Housing Alternative to build more affordable housing units in Milwaukee. But adding capacity, as also mentioned before, isn't enough. Research shows that preventing homelessness is also a key element, and that's why tenant protections is also so essential as we add more housing. When I think about our school district, I think about the families and the students that we serve and the young minds that we are working to develop into our future leaders. Many of you are parents and grandparents and are stakeholders in this community and in our school district, so you understand the importance of having a safe roof over our kids' heads. I just encourage you to please pass this relocation assistance as well as other policies that are going to stabilize families in our district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
And Martha.
Good evening. I'm Martha McLennan. I'm the Executive Director of Northwest Housing Alternatives. I wanted to come to speak to you tonight from the perspective of a landlord. You've heard some really compelling testimony from the perspective of tenants, and the stories that they tell are very resonant of the stories that we hear when people come to us seeking homeless services. So they have done a great job in telling those stories. So we are, as a nonprofit organization, we are a landlord. We own almost 1,900 units in 16 Oregon counties. Our residents in the aggregate save more than $7.6 million per year compared to what they would pay if they had to pay for market rents. But we are fundamentally a landlord. We need to collect rent, and we have mortgages that we need to pay. In our business, we have always used for-cause notices. We've never used no-cause notices. That's not allowed by many of our funding sources, and even when it is allowed for a particular property, it is against our policy to do that. In 2017, we had 6 evictions. That's all. We had 5 additional situations where we were prepared to file for-cause notices, but offered the residents the opportunity to leave voluntarily. I wanted to tell you that because you will often hear from landlords that they need the no-cause process as a way to make their businesses function. And what I want to let you know is that we don't need that to make our business function. What we see in landlords is a couple of other motivations that might be affecting them. One is the economic interest in gaining more revenue from their properties. The other is that they maybe have biases and that they're using a no-cause process to get around those biases, or simply to find an easier way of doing their business. For-cause notice does require that you have a bona fide cause, that you be prepared to go to court and represent that cause. And it does take a little bit of time, but it's exceedingly rare in our business. So I think the point I want to leave you with is that I think the for-profit landlords, the market landlords, can also adapt to some of the kinds of tenant protections that you're considering here. One final point that I'd love to kind of do offline at some point is that there are some special nuances in situations where a resident has a tenant-based rent assistance voucher or a project-based voucher. So I would want to make sure that you address those nuances in any drafting that you do of new legislation, and would be happy to help you work through that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Martha.
Some of you may be interested in hearing the next piece of this, because this is one part of the many ways we are currently trying to address housing affordability in the city of Milwaukee. As you can imagine, it's an exceedingly difficult problem. I'm sitting currently on the stakeholder bond committee to work on passing a bond metro-wide to build affordable housing. And we're talking about a $500 million bond, and yet that $500 million bond is only going to build enough to address about 5% of the current need. So it gives you some concept of how big the need is and how expensive it is. So we're going to have to get very creative as a society. So next up, we have the Clackamas County Housing Authority update on the Hillside Manor and Park Master Plan. And this will be introduced by our Development Director, Alma Flores, and several people from Clackamas County, apparently.
We brought the village.
Okay.
That's always good.
So please introduce yourselves.
Alma Flores, Community Development Director for the City of Milwaukee. I have the pleasure of working with a great team in Clackamas County's Health, Housing, and Human Services, and they're here tonight, as you've mentioned, Mayor and council members, to discuss the Hillside Manor and the park and an update to that project generally. With me today is Mary Rain O'Meara. She's a project coordinator with the Health and Housing and Human Services with the Housing Authority portion of that H3 group. Chuck Robbins is the Executive Director of the Housing Authority. Jill Smith is the Director of Housing for all of Clackamas County. So they're here to give you an update.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us. I'm Jill Smith. I'm actually the Deputy Director of Health, Housing, and Human Services, and Alma didn't know that I was going to be here, so she was on the fly here. But I have been charged with helping to lead all of the work around the affordable housing need in Clackamas County, so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and just introduce these two and talk for a minute about why we're having to even think about changing anything at Hillside Park and Manor. Hillside Park and Manor, as you know, has been a big part of your community in Milwaukee for so many years. The Housing Authority of Clackamas County is actually having its 80th birthday. 80 years as a housing authority. The first one in the country in May, first week of May.
State.
I'm sorry, not the country, in the state, yes. There's a few ones, older ones, especially on the East Coast. Unfortunately, there's been a federal disinvestment in public housing. All over the country, there are housing authorities that are opting out of public housing because the federal government isn't funding it. We can't afford to upkeep these old buildings, and it's just not meeting the needs that we have. We're in a state of emergency, as we've all just heard. These testimonies speak loudly to why we need to make a change and why we need to act. The U.S. Department of HUD has actually provided us tools and mechanisms that help them to get out of the public housing business. We really don't have any other option other than to take advantage of those and to work with you and other communities, in Clackamas County, to be creative and locally try to meet this tremendous need that we're facing. And Chuck and Mary Rain and Rich are going to talk to you for a minute about the plans and how we want to work with you to try. This is a huge opportunity. We have a tremendous resource, and I think we have an opportunity to make a difference, a real dent, even more so, maybe than the bond. With the two of these aligned together, we can really make a difference and help everybody.
So hi, thank you very much for having us here. I'm Chuck Robbins, Executive Director of the Housing Authority. Wanted to give you a quick little update about what's going on. If I get this to work. Do this left-handed. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on at our Hillside properties. So the properties that we're talking about, if I can get the arrow here. So this is Hillside. This is the Manor. It's 9 stories. It was built in 1970. It's 100 units, primarily made up of single residents. Very high percentage of them are disabled. It's a concrete building, and it is probably hasn't been updated since we built it. So it's, as I like to say, it's got good bones, but it definitely needs a facelift. The park itself is, where's my arrow? There we go. Park itself is here. So this is 100 units. They were built around 1942. They were originally built as vet family housing. World War II, I don't think that they had really expected to last this long. It just, it says an awful lot about the dedication of the maintenance staff that we had, the Housing Authority, that they're able to keep them, standing. I don't know if you planned it this way, but listening to the testimony just a little bit before us, really drives home why we're doing this. We've been asked, you've got 100 units there. Why are you gonna demolish those units? Well, it says the plan isn't to just demolish the units. The plan is to build more units on that site. We've got 545 public housing units throughout the county. 70% of those are in Oregon City and Milwaukee. We have parks like this, 16 acres, 100 units. The density is not there. The 545, yes, that's 545 families we can help. We easily have 10 times that number that we need to help. So that's what we're looking at doing here. We've got 2 projects underway. The Manor project is the first project that we've got going. We've gotten it's called a rental assistance demonstration grant. This allows us to convert it from public housing into something that we can incur debt on. So the plan is to, since we've received that application, go after 9% low-income housing tax credit and remodel this project. So that application is actually due this month. Mary Rain's going to go into a lot more conversation about this. The second is the park itself. We received a grant from Metro with the participation and the assistance from the city of Milwaukee to do a community plan. And the plan there is to look at those 100 units and to work with our stakeholders, work with the city, work with the neighborhood, work with the hospital, work with businesses, work with the residents, find out what we can build there. And ultimately, we want to put in a mixed income, mixed use community that is not just, single houses and duplexes, but it's a combination of multifamily. It is, possibly some home ownership opportunities, some duplexes, some common walls, a lot more vibrant kind of use of that property and an increase in the density. Also want to make sure that we bring in some economic development opportunities. So, there's right there along 32nd Avenue, maybe there's an opportunity to put in some small commercial. Everything's wide open. And, that's, I get to come in and talk, be the face, but Mary Rain's the one that actually does all of the work. She's the one that's been doing all of the applications and is the one that's kind of leading the work in Milwaukee. So I'm going to turn it over to her, let her talk some specifics about what we've been doing, and then hopefully open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. As Alma mentioned, I'm Mary Rain O'Meara, and I'm the lead project manager and housing development coordinator for the Housing Authority. So I just want to start by saying we're so excited to be at this point in partnership with the City of Milwaukee. As Chuck mentioned, there's tremendous potential at this site. I do want to preface this by saying that this is an existing community. So we are approaching this work not as this is a blank slate and we're starting from scratch, but our first priority stakeholder in this process are the existing residents at the site. So I'll talk a bit more about how we've been involving the residents and how we'll continue to involve the residents as we continue down this path. our priority project, as Chuck mentioned, is the rehabilitation of the Manor, 9-story concrete tower built in 1970. So we are submitting a 9% tax credit application to the state in 2 weeks. This is a competitive application. However, because we compete in an area that's specific for housing preservation, public housing preservation, we're hopeful that we'll be highly competitive in that process. We do have a strong team in place working with Scott Edwards Architecture, and we've put together a full scope of work for the rehab that includes structural, so seismic upgrades to meet building integrity in the event of an earthquake. It will include electrical engineering upgrades to bring the building up to code, HVAC or ventilation, and significant interior improvements to each of the apartments, which will really enhance and improve the livability for the current residents at the site. So if we're awarded the tax credits, we anticipate construction to begin in the spring of 2019, and that will be probably a 12 to 18-month process to get to completion of the rehab.
And so in the materials we got, you talked about relocation temporary. So you would have everybody out of there, or would you go floor by floor or something?
That's something we haven't really decided yet. You know, ideally, we'd like to go floor by floor, but because of the seismic upgrades, it's possible that we may have to go 2 or 3 floors at one time. But regardless, part of our application includes relocation. So we would move these individuals into extended stay hotels. We would be responsible, if they wanted us to pack up and move all of their belongings, store them, and then bring them back.
And when this work is done, would it still be a 100-unit?
That's a question.
It would,
facility?
yes. We're not planning on changing the unit amount of that building.
Mm-hmm.
The units are already on the smaller side, so there's really not opportunity to create more units. For the new unit production, we're looking at the remainder of the site. So just to talk about what we've done to involve the residents so far. We held 2 meetings with residents in October, and we brought our relocation counselor to those meetings. Of course, top of everyone's mind for both this project and the larger scale project is how are you going to take care of us? So as Chuck mentioned, we are bound and committed to full Uniform Relocation Act benefits. So every one of these households will be provided counseling services, they will be provided full relocation and moving assistance, and then the payments. For the Manor, it's going to be a shorter term than it will be for the park. We also talked about project timelines and just opened up the conversation about what are we looking at, why are we embarking on this process. We held a resident design workshop for the Manor on March 1st and had probably 60 residents participate in this design workshop. So a lot of interest and input was given to the architectural team at that time. I'll say the top 3 things that emerged as resident priorities were security at the building. So currently it's not sufficiently provided with secure entry camera systems. So one of the scope of work in the architectural approach is looking at how do we increase the security and safety of the residents at the building. And then just overall improving the building system. So the elevator, again, the electrical, the ventilation system, and then improving the interior. So new appliances, new flooring. We are doing asbestos remediation in all of the units and throughout the building as well. We touched on the relocation plan a bit, but again, for the Manor, this is a temporary relocation, and we will be refining that plan and keeping the residents informed as we move into active construction.
Is the building, does it have common areas, or is it pretty much just apartments? You just go in, you go to your
It does have a common, they call it the fellowship room on the ground floor, and there's also a resident library. So those 2 spaces are heavily used by the residents, and we've received a lot of input about how we can make improvements to those areas to increase the sense of community and the use of those spaces.
And are they primarily 1-bedroom?
We have 96 one-bedroom and 4 two-bedroom. So primarily single households. I believe there's 1 child at that building, so it's primarily single households and a few that are a couple in the 2. Okay, so moving on to our master plan. So as Chuck mentioned, this is what we've received Metro 2040 planning and development grant funds to begin. And we are in partnership with the city of Milwaukee on this process. Just bringing everyone up to speed with where we are. We have issued our consultant RFQs for both the master planning team and a health impact assessment that will be conducted concurrently with the design of the site. Those are due April, so end of this month, and we had our site visit today, and it was a packed room. So a lot of interest on the design and planning community to participate in this project. We will begin planning in the summer, so kick off the process. We'll have the teams in place, and we will at that time start our planning around what is our community engagement and participation plan look like. The design team has been asked to bring on a community engagement consultant to help us map that out. We are, though, anticipating, as Chuck mentioned, a very extensive community engagement process. So this will involve the residents of the site, the surrounding Ardenwald neighborhood, Providence, and a number of other stakeholders that will be identified to participate. So we are very eager to hear input from the city of Milwaukee as well in terms of who are key stakeholders that need to be involved in this process.
And we'll be sure to make sure to get those on the calendar so that folks who are interested in providing input in that community engagement process have an opportunity to be engaged there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
One note about the comprehensive plan. So our master plan timeline coincides with the City of Milwaukee comprehensive plan. So we envision having the preferred design concept that comes out of this process be reflected in the comprehensive plan. The current zoning is residential, and so we anticipate we will need to upzone that site to accommodate additional housing opportunities. So we are, again, very appreciative of the city in being involved in that dual role. So outcomes for this process, we hope to get to a preferred design concept that's not only embraced by the community and reflects a future for the site that expands housing opportunity, but that's also financial feasible. In the affordable housing world, we have very limited resources and tools with which to work. We're all hopeful for the Metro bond, but putting that potential aside, we will have development and financial feasibility testing happening as the design emerges for the site. So in other words, whatever we want to build on the site, we have to have a plan to build that, and we have to identify the sources of funding and the timelines. We are thinking this is a multi-phased redevelopment, likely 5 to potentially 10 years, just given the pace of demolition, relocation, and building back the site. So this will be a long process, but again, we're very excited to be launching the initial steps for the plan.
And I think it's that relocation piece that becomes, really crucial in our design. As Mary Rain said, the plan is not to just demolish all 100 units and then build new, because we're responsible for ensuring all 100 residents have a place to live. And as you've heard, it's pretty difficult to find a place to live, particularly in Milwaukee. So our goal would be to work on smaller pieces of that. So it may be out of that 16 acres, we pull aside 3 acres and we start to build, multifamily there. That allows us then to only have to relocate a small number of households and then give them first opportunity to move back. And then that gives us the units then that we can then use to shuffle people back and forth as we build that community. It's very, very difficult when you're trying to redevelop, and we have households, families, and communities already in place. But it is something that we are committed to. It's not just a requirement, but it is something that we feel very strongly about. And I think that we have that support from my very first meeting in front of the residents. I was there. Rich Swift, my boss, was there. Don Krupp, his boss, was there, and Jim Bernard, Don's boss, was there, and all of them echoed the same thing. Our first priority is to ensure that we take care of the residents that are there.
And you told us the Manor is mostly one-bedrooms and single people, but the Hillside Park is more families?
It is, yes. So it is larger units, 2 and 3 beds. So there are more children at the site. So that's definitely part of our consideration. The housing counselor will work with every family individually to customize a relocation plan that meets those families' needs. So that's when they'll have the opportunity to express their concerns and their desire for where they want to be. Obviously staying in the school district is a big priority for families and for the housing authority to ensure that we can make that happen.
Yeah, so what we're seeing out there, at least in the park, about 40% are single-person households, and 27% are households with at least one child, as opposed to the Manor where there's one child.
Mm-hmm. Rich, did you have something you wanted to finish questions?
Any other questions? I mean, that's why we're here. Mostly, we're just very excited to get started with this. It always feels like it takes a long time to get going, but I think we've got the pieces in place so that we can start to move forward. And we just really appreciate the fact that you're loaning us Alma, to kind of help out with this.
So, second office over there.
Well, I will say, when I was a new Milwaukee resident, I moved here in 2002, and within the first year or two, I started volunteering over there teaching Russian, because I was trying to help. There were a couple staffers. There was a woman, I think, named Lorelei. Does anybody know her? No?
Well,
okay,
maybe.
She may have retired long ago, but anyway, there was an effort to try and get the Ukrainian and Russian population and the local Oregonian population to communicate better. And so I was giving little Russian lessons to some staff and some residents in Hillside Manor, and in the little community room that's attached to the laundry facility out there, but I was inside the Manor several times at a couple of people's places, and I will tell you, even back then in 2004, the Manor needed an upgrade. So I'm very glad to hear that you're working on that.
Well, and we do have a very large Ukrainian population that lives at Hillside. In fact, we're really excited. Our newest hire is a maintenance assistant that speaks Russian and Ukrainian. So I mean, it's just a perfect fit, and of course that's where he's going to be, eventually working when he gets trained up.
So you talked about having to change the status of the tower in order to be able to have debt on it. So explain in really fifth grade kind of terms what that looks like, and how then that guarantees to remain affordable housing.
Sure. Let me take a shot at it. So to begin with, you have to know that public housing, it may be owned by the county, but it is heavily regulated by HUD. And one of the requirements is that public housing may not have any debt. So that means if we're going to do any improvements on public housing, we have to either get grants or we have to get money from HUD. And as Jill mentioned, HUD's just not given us a lot of money for this. So HUD recognized that we've got a very aging portfolio across the country. So they've given us this vehicle called RAD, Rental Assistance Demonstration. What that allows us to do is, through an application to HUD, we remove the the strict HUD regulations on that property, and it still has the income requirements that you would see in public housing, but you're now able to incur debt on it. So we can now go after 9% tax credit and do the improvements. I mean, what we didn't talk, the budget on this is significant. I mean, it's upwards of over $12 million to do this work. We only receive about $800,000 a year from HUD to maintain public housing. So there's a significant gap. Now, we've done that with the Manor. We're also going to have to do that with the park. I mean, I don't think that we've actually received approval for that.
We've received what's called a multi-phase approval. So again, that's why we're setting it up with the Manor as our first phase RAD project. And HUD has given us an additional year to complete the planning for the park, and then has said at the end of that time, you need to submit the application and then go after funds to do the redevelopment.
So this is a process that we're going to have to go through with all of the property that we want to convert out of public housing.
Have you, I realize there's going to be a lot of public process and a lot of input into what the master plan's ultimately going to look like, but in your minds, what are you kind of thinking? How many units do you want to end up with in there? What would be optimal for you? Do you have numbers that you've been thinking about, kicking around, something?
Well, kind of depending on what the zoning is. We did a similar exercise in Oregon City, 16 acres. We had a little bit more high density, and we ended up with over 300 units.
Yeah.
So I think that 300 to 400 units would be an ideal number.
Yeah.
If we can go back. I can figure out. So this picture here, again, find my arrow.
Doesn't show up sometimes.
Find the arrow for me. Where it is. There it is. There it is. I should just do it here. This area here. There we go. It's not working. So you see where there it is. You see where the Manor is.
Yeah.
And right behind the Manor is also property.
Yeah, all that vacant property.
So that's property that we're also looking at doing some development. So, the prudent way to do this is build something there first, so you're not having to relocate anybody and then relocate individuals there. So that's something that we're also going to take a look at. That will all be part of the community plan. We've got to do some geotech out there. I've heard stories that things have been dumped there over the years. So I don't know. We don't know what the subsoil is like. But that's just part of development, and that's what I have Mary Rain for, because she
and geographically, that's also kind of down at the bottom of the hill, right?
It is at the bottom of the hill.
A taller building would fit very comfortably down there.
Right. That's what we thought too.
Well, when you say taller, so currently you would not be allowed to build another 9-story building.
That's correct.
Right.
I'm amazed we were allowed to build one to begin with.
The tallest building in Clackamas County, isn't it?
It surely is.
I think so. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. We also have an opportunity from the private sector side for the close to 8 acres of land to the south
of that, yeah.
south of
the Murphy site,
Hillside
right?
Manor and Park area, the Murphy site, which is currently on the market, and there have been several proposals that have come forward. And we've always connected them with Clackamas County for that synergy in this project area.
Yeah, very complementary site.
Possibly have a 22-plus acre development opportunity.
Are they going to be involved in the master planning process? Good.
Absolutely.
Well, the zoning rests with us, so you figure out how we best serve the community, and we'll make the zoning work.
And it just so happens we have a comprehensive plan town hall meeting tomorrow night at 6 p.m.
We won't be talking about housing, though, and that.
But
yes,
this whole process informs whether or not eventually something else can be built there.
So Richard Swift has joined us, and he's the director of the Health Housing and Human Services, and he has a few words to say.
Thank you all. So if I may, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, Mayor Gamba, the council, and first of all, I really appreciate the partnership and collaboration. You know, I think it was your second resolution spoke to engaged communities result in change. Well, it also takes engaged governments, and it also takes governments that are willing to work with each other, be cooperative, collaborative, and I absolutely feel that from the city of Milwaukee, both professionally and personally. This is an important relationship for me. I won't start crying like some of my counterparts do at other meetings.
I wonder who you're
Never had.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it happen.
It's just an urban myth.
Yes, absolutely. So, but this will take cooperation, and it's going to take us being innovative. It's going to take us being willing to engage in shared risk together. If the GOB, the general obligation bond that Metro is considering, goes through in November, you know, it has the chance to bring upwards of $90 million in housing to the metro area of Clackamas County, where 72% of our residents reside. And so I wish I could snap my fingers and, you know, instead of 5 to 10 years, as you heard in terms of the project timelines, and I will be pushing the staff, they know this already, that I want these projects delivered more quickly. We will also be looking aggressively regarding the use of those monies that may be coming from this obligation bond towards looking at some of these areas and seeing what we can do to increase affordable housing. You know, we are in the process of, I think, very soon getting a shovel in the ground off of Audi Road, which is right off of 205, which is 212 units of 60% AMI, average median income housing. Now, this is a substantial project for us because this is a guaranteed affordable housing of 60% of average median income for 60 years.
Wow.
So this is 212 units. It locks these rents in with marginal increase for a period of 60 years. We are going to be looking to do the same exact thing elsewhere in the county because this is what the residents, in terms of the stories and testimonials I heard earlier, are going to need in order to be able to raise their families and have a predictable place in our communities. And so you have my assurances that we are going to be leaning forward on this with you all and absolutely engaged, because it's going to take us doing this type of work to get in front of some of this issue. Because as you spoke, Mayor Gamba, you know, $50 million or $500 million sounds like a lot of money. It is going to barely make a dent ultimately across the Tri-County region in terms of the housing crisis we're facing. But we got to start someplace. So I appreciate the opportunity for my team here to come and present to you all and answer questions, and we will be, you know, moving forward with you all on this. So thank you.
Thank you. We are really looking forward to all that.
Yeah, you have an extraordinary team. I think it was maybe one of the very first meetings I scheduled after I was elected mayor was to come meet with you all to start talking about opportunities that we could partner together to get some of this going, because
I think at that time I was actually interim director.
It was. So, I remember those times.
Permanent now, at least for right now. You know, it's always, you know, permanent probation with a job like this.
Well, thank you all very much for your work.
Thank you.
Yeah. We will take a 5-minute recess. 5 long enough? Okay.
I can make a phone call if I need to.
Oh, welcome.
We're on air.
All right, we're back. So next up, we have the Letting Library Design and Development presentation with our librarian and Layla and architects and all kinds of people. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor. Councilors, Layla Aman, the development manager for the city. I'm joined here by Katie Newell, our library director, and our design team, Scott Manhard and Tyler Nishatani, I'm sorry. So I'm really excited to be able to present to you our design development update. Our design team will do most of that presentation, but if you'll just indulge me for a moment, this is a pretty monumental milestone for us. We're entering into the construction documents phase, which means this project is moving and it's moving forward, and we're really excited about that. But it really takes a village. There's a number of staff that aren't present today that I would like to acknowledge. First and foremost, Haley Fish, who's been at the helm of this project for quite some time and has helped get us to where we are today, our finance director. Alma Flores, of course, who's also played a key role and has really helped us actually find a temporary location for our library. We just signed a lease with TriMet, so that's an enormous, again, milestone for us as well. Jana Hoffman and Nancy Wittig, also from the city, from the library, have been really instrumental in this. In addition, our design team includes Will Dan, Laura Klinger, who've also been big parts of this team and really important members of this team, as well as William Silva, who is our contractor, who's been our partner as well from Swinnerton. So we have a really dynamite team. I'm delighted to be part of it, and it's because of this team that we are where we are today, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to hit you with schedule and budget, and then I'm going to turn it over to our design team to show you the amazing building that we're going to be breaking ground on, hopefully in a few months, and starting our construction late this summer. So just to give everyone context as to where we are, we have authorized construction documents, so our team will talk a little bit about what that means, but we're basically at the phase where we have designed the building and we're going into the real details of the constructability of this building. So we are expecting that process to take about 16 weeks, and then at the end of that, that's when we would be going in for building permits and moving towards construction. So it's a really exciting time for the project. Just to give everyone an update in terms of where we are on the budget, I firmly believe we have a building we're going to build. We had, just to give folks some perspective, when we were here last time at the schematic design phase, our estimated construction cost for the building was $8.4 million, which was a budget that was really not within reach for our resources at the time. And the reason why I wanted to mention the team is that it took a lot of effort and a lot of work and a lot of thought, a lot of hard decisions to get us to a building that we think is both the quality that our citizens deserve, has the design integrity that we also want, and then serves the function of the library, and is also going to be a beautiful civic institution. So to cut a budget down from $8.4 million to what we're estimating right now is it's $7.69. Took a lot of work and a lot of heart, and I think what you'll see today is a really beautiful, functional building that is sustainable. We did not compromise on those values in particular, and I'm really proud of what the team has done, and I just want to acknowledge that took a lot of effort. Just to give folks sort of a sense of where we are, this is in your packet as well, but we're currently looking at a budget deficit of about $264,000. Those are pretty precise numbers. So we get a cost estimate at the end of design development. We'll have another cost estimate at the end at 50% construction documents, where you have a lot more detail in terms of the hard construction costs, but we feel really good about where this is. The resources aren't simply the bond. I want to acknowledge Ann, our city manager, who has done a tremendous job doing outreach and helping us raise additional money. We got an appropriations from the state legislature legislature of $300,000, which was significant.
Thank you to Representative Garnpower for her exceptional work on that.
Shout out to Representative Power. We've also been working internally as well to see what kinds of fees and other things that we can work with in order to help reduce the overall costs. The Friends of the Library have given us $100,000 or $1 million, I'm sorry, and then the Library Foundation has committed $100,000. And Katie will give us a summary of our efforts for fundraising because we still have some work to do, but I feel really confident that we will get there. So it's really been a combination both of fundraising efforts, of outreach efforts, as well as the city being creative in how we can utilize our resources in order to help close that budget gap. We have some additional targeted resources that are still out. PGE's Renewable Development Fund, the IMLS grant, which is a library grant, the Collins Foundation, and then we also have a fundraising goal that the foundation has set. And again, I'll let Katie talk about that at the end of the presentation. So I feel really good about this. I think going into CDs with this kind of budget gap is reasonable, and I feel confident that we as a city and as the design team works towards refining the project. They work really closely with our contractor to really look at how we can reduce costs. And we'll do our best on both sides, but we've really kind of hit the point at which we now really need to get ourselves ready to go, and I feel confident that we'll get there. So that's the budget side of things. I think it might be helpful to pause here, and then I can hand it over to our design team to walk you through the building, see if anyone has questions.
Do we have any idea when we would hear about some of those grants?
Yeah, so some of them are highly likely and some of them are less likely. And we may be learning about these grants in 9 months, to be honest. So part of what we've been trying to get to is the point where I can sign a GMP, that we have sufficient funding so that we can sign for the document or sign for the building and start construction. One of the things I've really appreciated that Layla's been working on with the architects, and thank you to both sides, is that there's going to be a point at the 50% design for construction designs where we can actually reevaluate if we've received any additional money and return some of the things we've had to cut to get me to the point where I can sign. So the short answer is we've had to make some painful cuts, and we're going to reinstate those cuts if we are able to get grant funding or if we are able to pull in personal contributions, and that will make the building even more beautiful. It is a beautiful building now. So we feel like we're doing a great job for the city of Milwaukee. They're going to have an awesome resource. But we did have to cut some really cool features in order to make this fly.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll hand it over to Scott and Tyler.
Thank you all for having us here. We're really excited to share the design updates that we've made since last time we were in front of you all in the schematic design phase. These are just the kind of the industry standard phases, right? And so in schematic design, we presented the design concept and the layout and the shape of the building. And then in design development, as Layla mentioned, this is really just about is what it says it's doing, right? It's developing that design in more detail. And that's where significant changes to the layout, shape, or configuration of the spaces occurs. And it culminates in the submission of the design to the for land use hearing for the Type 3 design review that it's going to be going through. So then next phase that we're starting right away is construction detailing. There's tweaks that can be done, kind of minor adjustments, but it's really about constructability at that point there. So, and that's kind of what this slide here demonstrates in just a little bit more detail. So the update. This is the overall aerial view of the site plan. This is Southeast Harrison and 21st here, and north being to the screen left here, and there's the pond here. So this is essentially the same site plan we presented in at the end of schematic design. What we've done is just really worked on kind of shaving and shaping the overall building form, very slightly from last time we were here. Let's see. So that generates this is a floor plan showing the arrangement of interior spaces, same orientation as the site plan. Again, it's essentially the same shape and layout. I'll just do a quick walk through of the plan. So we have a covered walkway that takes you from the street corner to the main entrance. And the main entrance is in the middle of the library floor plan. So you can come in and go left to the children's area or right to the adult area. And so the reading room and the stacks area wraps all the way around in this big open space, wraps around both ends. But the children's wing is down here and the adult is here. And at the main entrance is the community room and the restrooms. And so the more public functions are consolidated right at the main entry there. And I'll just maybe go through the other spaces here. We still have conference rooms available for the public to use. We have a teen room that's out front here. This area represents, there's a couple smaller study rooms for smaller meetings or singular study. This area all represents the staff administration area, kind of the back of house operations of this. That's close to the main entrance, windows out to the main entry, and also the book drop, for the patrons here to all happen kind of right in here. We have the Friends bookstore up front here on the lobby. There's the community room here. This stuff represents a lot of kind of utilities and back of house elements here. Electrical room, IT storage, etc. There's a family restroom here serving the kids area. There's the children's administrative area offices. And then down here is children's story time in this corner here.
So, can the gap between the at the entryway, will that be closable so that meeting room and those bathrooms can be used for after hours meetings and events?
Yes,
it will.
We're working on the most appropriate method for doing that to meet the budget. But yeah, that is a goal for us. That's one of the adjustments we're going to be working on.
And where does the truck come that drops off books, the interlibrary loan kind of books that get dropped off every day? It goes in the front main entrance?
Yeah, they will be able to come in right there, park right where his hand is, and then go up. Okay. And right there is the entrance, and then that's where we will store the books and have the crates.
So you'll have another door, like a staff-only door there. Okay, got it.
Good question.
Got it.
And the walkway used to go both directions from the main entrance, and I know that was shaved for financial reasons. Can you ballpark the savings for that?
You mean for covering it?
Yeah,
the other direction?
The walkway used to be covered both ways.
Yeah.
So pretty much all the parking spaces, you get out of your car, you would be under cover, or more importantly, you're walking out of the library with books, you walk 6 feet to the door of your car.
Layla's looking for the price.
Okay.
And maybe this is, I might suggest that if it's possible to adjust where the handicap spots are positioned, because someone maybe needing a little bit more mobility assistance would probably require the coverage more than me.
I see.
Well, that's a good point.
That would be the key.
Yeah, it's just if we can get some more funding, I'm wondering if it's possible to put that.
That would be a significant design change at this point. You'd have to redesign the layout and the situation on the building, because you've cut off basically that whole section and included it inside the building. So I'm not The things that I've been talking about when I'm thinking about replacing items into the build have really been the ceiling design, which was priced out at around $270,000, I think. So we eliminated that. We've also had some discussions. We had to remove like wood paneling in the children's area that sort of designates that story area differently than the rest of the spaces that we had to pull out. So at this point, it's probably more aesthetic items that we could replace, or you're going to be doing a change order with the architect in order to do a significant redesign.
Okay.
And behind, is that something we're building behind the building, or is that just existing? There's like a little, in your picture, no,
To the left. To the left.
where you left, that.
Oh, yeah, good question.
Water quality.
Yeah, I should have highlighted that on the previous site plan. So this shows it a little better. These kind of dark blue areas represent the 3 areas that collect the roof runoff water from the roof, basically, and they filter it and clean it before it goes into the water system or the sewer system. So but they're in visible locations, so you can so patrons of the library can see, stormwater cleansing, featured at work.
The canopy was estimated at around $80,000 for that section of the canopy. Goes over the sidewalk.
One of the other things, and I'm not sure if are you guys going to talk about the grounds a little bit?
We can use this slide here to talk about that.
Can you talk about the grounds for a few minutes, just about what we've also removed from this current design and why?
Okay, from this image here, yeah. So while the aforementioned stormwater garden, we still need to have that essential function here. We also have a location for the fountain spout sculpture that's currently
Lee Kelly sculpture.
Yep. And so this showed a minimum landscape scope of connecting a path to the amphitheater, but we're understanding that until a Scott Park master plan is put in place, we're to do the most simple landscape, possible for that north end until that, to make sure that what we're doing, fits into the larger whole.
And that was actually a request of NCPRD. So when we decided that we didn't have sufficient money to do like a paved plaza, basically at that end, they took on the responsibility to redo the master plan. And even though they're doing a lot for us right now, they actually think that they can do it in the next couple of years. And they want to have a community dialogue around the space. PARB has actually received some requests to look at this in a couple of different ways. So that process is already tangentially starting.
So this is an updated image. It's very similar to the image we showed in schematic design, because we like this because it shows the building as a whole, and you can kind of see the whole overall building form. It's essentially the same as what we presented, where we have an undulating roof that takes advantage of some of the best features of the site. For example, the large oak tree that's on Harrison, its canopy can spread out over while the roof form goes low at this point here. And then the roof form rises up to allow a great view in from this intersection, both into the library and from the library back out to City Hall. And, a really great window into to the city here. As you can see then, the covered walkway directs you all the way to the main entrance, and that's the peak of the roof here. And that peak of the roof, so it not only marks entry, but that ridge line extends out to provide a really grand view of the pond and the trees upon entry into the space, into the library. And then the roof line then gets shorter and diminishes as it gets close to that kind of children's story time area to kind of bring the scale and the ceiling height down to match the scale of the children. But then the far corner at the amphitheater, it lifts back up again to provide a full view of the park area and the amphitheater. And so now we can we'll walk around the building showing more photorealistic renderings of what the library looks like. So this is as if you were standing on that opposite corner of City Hall at Harrison, and here's Harrison, and here's 21st in the parking area that leads in there. So you can see that window that we were talking about, both views into the library and then back out from the library to the city. And then this shows that gateway, covered walkway to the main entry. So now we've crossed the street and we're looking down that covered walkway, tall, wide, and then it culminates in the main entry of the building here.
Is it sort of showing a green wall or trellises or something from the other angle?
Oh, yes. Here?
Yeah.
Yes. So what you're seeing here is both like structured shade, like a trellis, and also vines growing up on that to provide kind of a dappled light effect and kind of that the tree canopy provides when you go into the park. So that'll kind of shade this big reading room in there too, and provide that kind of really nice park-like quality light. This happens to be a tree that's freestanding in a planted island that helps kind of shade the parking area and provide as like a streetscape. And then what you see here is so this is the low part of the roof. Some stormwater collects in this stormwater planter at the front that's about bench seating height. So it provides kind of a pedestrian amenity and also a great demonstration of water filtration before it goes into the sewer. So there's that covered walkway to the main entry. And then so next the image is going to be jumping to the main entry from the parking lot area. So here we are, we've moved down that covered walkway. There's that staff area, entry here. And so this is the view if you're crossing the parking lot at a crosswalk, and there's kind of a generous kind of plaza area to be, for gathering, meeting, being dropped off, etc. So it just provides a little space there. That's landscaped with flowering trees there too. So that's the main entrance to the library. The doors open and go through. This window is a large window that looks into the community room. So you can probably see some rows of chairs there set up here. So it's a big window into the community room, and there's another window into the community room there, and that's also the second means of egress out of the community room. So when it does get secured from the rest of the library, there's two ways out from that. So that's just a functional requirement, but that's what you see in this image. Now we've continued on down the walkway to the north end, and this is what we were just speaking about with Ann. We're looking back towards the main entrance here, the extent of the parking lot, and this is the end of the building and the children's area. So here's that reading area. It's kind of lower ceiling height, and here's how the roof lifts up and shows views out to the park here. So this does show the landscaping a little bit more complex than what we're looking for, that we're going to be doing. It'll be pretty much lawn. And then we have another image. So now we've gone back all the way around the building. This is the Harrison curve as we're coming into downtown. And so 21st is right here. So it's looking towards downtown, and here's the pond, right? So here's where you can really see how the undulating roof kind of rises and falls and stretches along the park, taking advantage of the linear nature of that view of the trees in the park. So more of the glass is concentrated on the areas that receive the most shade, have the best views and the most shade. As part of our sustainable design strategy is to have limit the amount of windows that are on the west, which are a liability for heat gain, and concentrate more of the glazing, the glass, on the park where the best views are and the most shade is. So it's kind of essential into our sustainable design practice.
To improve the thermal performance of the overall envelope, we added a good amount of solid wall to this elevation. I think in schematic design and even design development, it was much more glass on this side. But what we've done is we've positioned the solid walls straight out from the stacks and left the occupiable areas of the library open to windows. And there's a large expanse of windows that's straight across from the entry, so when you walk through the front doors and through that foyer, it projects you to a big glass wall that connects you to the park. And there's a natural kind of break in the existing tree canopy, so that's really the best view of the pond.
This shows just kind of a close-up view of kind of the material palette. It's a wood building in the park, so it's got a kind of a natural appearance to its wood siding here, vertical wood siding, and here's an example of that vertical screen trellis that will help produce kind of that dappled light effect and help shade our windows. And then outside, underneath the covered walkway, is more of a natural wood, like not pigmented stain, and so it'll be nice, light, and bright under that tall canopy. And then, so a very simple material palette, very natural, renewable wood building, wood cladding. This next section kind of highlights a few of the sustainable features. Tyler, you want to talk about this?
Yeah. So treading lightly, we very specifically have positioned the footprint of the building to largely coincide with the footprint of the existing building. That's what you see with the bigger dashed outline. That's the footprint of the existing building. So there is a water quality resource designation over the property, but you can see that a large part of it coincides with the existing library. So at the kind of point of our chevron shape, we're into the water quality resource, but it's overlaps with the existing footprint. And there's a small portion where we'll have new intrusion, but you can see there's also a corner of the existing building that we'll be able to replant, mitigate with. So it's not quite an even trade-off, but it's pretty close. There's not that much new intrusion. And that's really been a priority, that we kind of stay out of that zone. Obviously, making a connection to it is important, but not putting too much of the building footprint in that area is important. And also, this footprint, being one story and not two, maximizes the accessibility. Right now, the entrance is roughly in the same location as the library now, but there won't be any stairs, no ramps. Everything's on grade and flat. So we see it as a big improvement in that sense as well. The big focus of sustainability for us has been on the energy side. We are on the Energy Trust of Oregon's path to net zero, which is their most aggressive energy target. And that kind of goes in two different major strategies. The first is that we try and reduce the amount of energy we're consuming as much as possible, and then we're also providing renewable energy to further diminish our energy use, with the goal that eventually we'd be able to get to net zero. So the first is having an extremely robust walls and roof assembly. We've got 4 inches of continuous insulation in our solid walls, and I think over 8 in our roof, which is very robust. And then we've got a PV array on the roof that's contributing to energy generation on site. So on the energy saving side, we're projecting meeting the 2030 challenge, which is a 70% reduction over the national average for libraries. Here's a EUI comparison. I think the surprising one is how much energy the existing building is consuming right now, up there at 146, which you can see is significantly above that national library average. At the end of schematic design, we made the decision to go with what we called the best sort of energy HVAC system, which is a radiant floor slab, which has allowed us to maintain tracking that 23 EUI for the current design. This is
and this one, what does that represent?
Yeah, that's basically a code minimum building. And that was one option that we kind of carried, but understanding the community's goals to make a very energy efficient building, we just kind of put that on there as sort of a baseline, as a point of reference.
And so there's enough sun on the roof for solar, huh?
Yeah, so
I'm surprised.
If you click back,
with all the trees.
We got an updated solar feasibility study, which is that red outline. So they said on the area of the site, once we sort of remove some of the existing trees for the footprint, that's kind of our area of viability. So you can see the array of those sort of blue cells, which are located in that area of feasibility.
So go back to the
next slide.
energy. So So the numbers I got the other day was roughly 30 some odd thousand.
So right now, the calculation is that we're spending about $30,000 on energy for our annual use of the building. If this were a 20,000 square foot building, that would go up to $46,000 per year, just based on that EUI. So when you drop it down to what we think is about a sixth of our current usage, that drops you down to about $7,500 a year in energy costs, and that is before solar. So that will reduce it further.
So the solar wasn't calculated.
It's not calculated. It's in the use. The EUI is your use on site, and then we go back and look at that, how we supplement.
All right.
Do I remember that when we were having the conversation initially about whether to go with better or best, that the dollar figure between the code and the library design really wasn't that big of a difference? So we're getting quite a bit of a benefit out of.
So what the deal, and you guys correct me, but basically the architects and Swinnerton did a really nice job of when we were looking at a better system or the best system. So not code, but already looking at a better system or the best system. They found a way to make the best system the same price.
Same price.
So it's still an addition to what it would be at code. However, they got us the exceptional for the price of the great, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the next slide just shows some comparisons for how much energy or metric tons of CO2 that equates to, which is really, I think those comparisons are pretty shocking. Go to the next slide. Okay.
Pretty significant.
Yeah. Okay. So, call to action.
This is where we talk about how we're going to raise more money. And the foundation has stepped up to be our conduit for people making any type of contribution. They put a website up, and that is LettingLibraryofMilwaukeeFoundation.com. All just one great big long word. And on that, you can go to PayPal, you can make a credit card, you can send in a check if you want. But we have printed these out, and we're putting them out at the library. We will extend that. We just really quickly wanted to get that out to people. And so in the first 2 days, I was really excited because we got over $300. And so I was like, wow, this is great, but it's slowed down. So we need to, up the ante here. Sarah's going to be putting more information in our newsletter, and we will just be putting it out and handing these out at meetings and wherever you go. We will have these out for people just to know anything. Doesn't have to be $100, doesn't have to be $500, $10. It all adds up. And so we are really hoping that we can get that, make that match that we need to, so that we are taking care of everything, maybe add some of these features back in. But we're very pleased with the results of this, and I just want to thank everybody for giving us the time to get this all up and together. I believe, Joe, are you still here? Joe is the treasurer for the foundation, and so he's been very instrumental in getting this put through, so we owe him a big thanks, too.
Huge thanks to Joe.
Yes.
Just so people know on air, Joe is also the former Katie. So Joe has been working on this building for a very long time, and his dedication to achieving the Milwaukee Letting Library rebuild has been
Since
extensive.
1999, he's been working on this. So he's really excited to see it go forward. And I also want to give really the Friends a huge shout out and thank you, because they stepped up and have guaranteed us $100,000. They're going to give us $80,000 this year, and then they're going to kind of see with the changes that are coming about with their ability to have the Sunday market, they're going to be a little bit more challenged on raising funds, but they are looking to be able to give $80,000 this year and then $20,000 in 2019.
Well, and this is a great opportunity for us to talk about something that Katie's been working on with Peter Passarelli. And I know it's a little early, but I want to talk about it anyway. Katie and her team came up with the idea of using one of our old vans to actually help move some of the books around for the Friends so that we can continue our sales even as the bay is constructed. So we're working on that right now, and I really appreciate both Katie and Peter bringing that to my table and finding a way to get them a solution while we're under construction.
Nice. You know, before they had the bay, they did sell in a tent at the farmer's market. And of course, that's not as big and that's not as easy, but they did that for a few seasons.
I know. And not that I want to remind them because they, so I said, well, we'll have a van and we'll just park out of the van and it will be like our version of a bookmobile kind of thing. So it's going to be, I think they really are excited about this, and I'm going to pick the van up on Sunday morning, bring it over. We'll pull out boxes, and then we'll load it back up at the end of the day, whatever they haven't sold. Then that gives them all week to fill up what they want. So they really shouldn't be losing too much of their selection, and so they're pretty excited about this. And they're very grateful to the city for helping out with this cooperation. And I found it's the police van.
We did take all of the equipment out of it, and the decals are being removed. But
we should park it out by McLaughlin.
just to slow people down as we're doing
just that one decal on the one side.
I was like, can I have a siren? This is like so cool. And I don't think they will let me. That or a taser. I'm like, what's wrong?
For some odd reason, we didn't think that was a good idea.
Yeah. They keep on telling me no.
But it will provide us a great solution during the interim, and so we're going to make this work. We're going to figure out how to get through construction for the Friends specifically, so that they have a solution as we come back to you and talk to you about the bay in the next week or two. Thanks.
That's it. Well, I will say, for my part, I was playing the lottery really regularly. And then I went on vacation, but I'm going back to playing the lottery. And when I win that lottery, you'll have $2 more million.
That makes a really good point. It's easy if maybe you can't give $100 all at once, but now that there's a donation button, you don't have to write individual checks. It's easier to maybe budget for your lottery budget.
Right.
Push that button on the library page, because that
could be $100
guaranteed benefit to the library, as opposed to your 1 in 6 billion chances of winning the lottery.
But somebody just won $451 million.
And how many people played for that?
Give them our number.
Yeah.
Well, and there are people out there. I don't know how to reach them all, but we have some wealthy areas in Milwaukee. We have right there, walking distance to the library. We have Waverly with some people with lots of money, and it seems, please come forward and support this community.
And if there's ever any time that any of you are going to be talking to a business or anybody, I am more than willing to go. I'll ditch the sling soon.
Don't keep the sling.
Only 2 more weeks.
I'll put a cast on, in fact.
It would be better if you were in from something we really need help.
Look what this did, no. Yeah. But I am more than willing to go do what I need to do, because this is very important to me.
Well, we should be at least getting the one pager, that now that it's developed, and we can take that to those meetings instead of your sling.
We can get copies for you guys into your boxes too. Yeah. So we'll have those in there this week.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, and if it's on Facebook, we can all repost it, share it.
It's on our website, and it's on this website, so it's available, and I'm pretty sure Sarah linked it up to Facebook.
I think she did.
Yeah. So we're in good shape that way. So thank you.
I'll share it.
Share that donate button.
I post it on Facebook, but I'll share it once it's on there.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, Can I ask, there was also in your report, and since we have Andrea here from the Art Mob, there is the thing about art and art. So what are you pitching? What is the art element that people are submitting for, or do they get to pick an art element?
They get to pick an art element. We had a set budget, and we were looking for 1 to 2 pieces using that budget. We did open up the bidding process. We received a number of artists' interest. So the committee is meeting on that and looking for solutions to getting some additional art into the library.
And that just happened? The bids were due the 2nd?
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Okay.
So it's been cut off now. So I was just asking Andrea, if she knew how many we had received, and we were like, no, I don't know this yet. So we're going to be finding out tomorrow.
Cool.
Great.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I kind of liked you here.
I know, it's kind of fun over here. And I miss Wilda.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have the council goal setting for 2018-2019. It's a discussion around goals for the next 2 years, and it will be introduced by City Manager Ann Ober. We need that hand microphone for.
It's right here.
Oh, you
I
got
have it.
Good.
Shane, now it's
They
my
got me
turn.
ready early on. Is it turned on?
It is, but it doesn't affect this room. It's
Okay.
just the TV, so you're
That's
going to have to
perfect.
talk loud.
You have to make sure it's on, she said, though.
Oh, now it's on.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I wanted to talk to you tonight about goal setting. We originally were going to talk about this during our retreat that was supposed to happen in April, but unfortunately there was some confusion about the date. So we need to have this before I write the budget so that I make sure that I fund the priorities that have been outlined by council. So tonight is going to be limited. We're only doing this for half an hour. If it takes longer than half an hour, we're going to have to find an additional time because we do have an executive session we're going back into tonight. So we're doing 2 things. One, we're going to confirm what I believe are 2 goals that are staying on the list. And then we're going to talk about a 3rd goal that we originally said was a 1-year goal and where we are in that process and what you all want to do with it. I'm going to give you a few options. Does that sound good? Okay. So the first one is a confirmation. I have had individual conversations with all of you, and I believe that these continue to be a 4-1 or a 5-0 vote to support housing affordability as a continued goal of this council, and then the Milwaukee Bay Park. But I wanted to open up a conversation if anybody has concerns about keeping those on for the rest of the year. And when I say keeping these on, we will be revisiting these in January of 2019 when a new council is seated.
I would want to keep those 2, personally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. So these I've already looked at for budget constraints, and we're already including items towards these goals within the budget for the upcoming biennium. So the discussion really comes down to the goal that council set around the climate action plan. And we were very clear when you were doing goal setting this last year that you wanted it to be specifically to achieving a climate action plan. You heard an update earlier today that we are going to be completing that climate action plan in July. And unfortunately, it doesn't perfectly match up to the budget cycle. And so I wanted to come back and see if at this point council is interested in a couple of options. One is implementation of a climate action plan something you want to decide on now? Do you want to talk about it in September or January? September once we're done with the cap. January when the new council is seated? Or do you want to talk about it now? And do you want to include that? As an alternative, council has the ability to change that goal entirely once the climate action plan is completed, which is in July. And I've had a number of comments come up from all of you as to things you'd like to talk about in coming years, things like Vision Zero or broadband or whatever other ideas you guys want to put up tonight. So I wanted to namely open a conversation with you about how you'd like to proceed on this 3rd goal, knowing that you're about to accomplish the 3rd goal as you set it. How can I help you do that?
Well, to my mind, a climate action plan if it's just a sheaf of papers that gets stuck on a shelf somewhere, it was a waste of time and money. So the implementation of that plan is actually what matters. And I would think that even going into budgeting, I know that I would want to begin implementation on as much as we can, as soon as we can. So my ideal would be that I don't know what we call the new goal, implementation of the Climate Action Plan, but that we fund 1 FTE and a moderate budget, whatever that looks like, for the first year or until we do the next budget, so that that person can then begin to start doing the things that the plan tells us to do, like negotiating with PG, like all of those things.
I just want to modify for the people who are not in the room tonight. So when you say 1 FTE, what you're really asking for is we need to increase our staffing capabilities to be able to accomplish this. Right now, we have staff who are taking this on. Peter Passarelli has been doing an exceptional job of capturing what he can within his portfolio, but he's limited on what he can accomplish. So my proposal to you is that if you do want an implementation plan, is that I would probably be putting in staffing and some office money, basically, for an individual to be able to accomplish next steps. That's why it's a budget discussion for me. Yeah.
I think that there should be at least I support some sort of climate-related goal.
Okay.
The question that I have had, that I've shared with you, Ann, and others, is to have a goal that says we're going to implement a plan that hasn't been drafted. We don't know what that plan says, so it's a little bit difficult for me to say, let's implement a plan that I don't even know what it says yet. Mm-hmm. But I do think we need some sort of a climate-related goal personally, or at least I support that. We talked earlier in our work session about the dot voting, and I haven't seen any of those things. So if I were going to create some sort of climate action plan goal, it would be something about that we will still evaluate things that come forward, and we'll try and do those that we can get the maximum benefit for the cost that we can afford, which I think we've discussed, and I would support something more along that lines than just a broad implement a plan that hasn't been drafted.
Well, and earlier tonight we talked about the fact that we are a small town. And I don't think Mr. Passarelli or I have any interest in trying to be on the bleeding edge of this topic. There are many who have gone before us, and we would be looking to implement things that we could do efficiently and at a good price because we don't have a lot of extra money. The first couple years of doing something around a climate goal are very specific, whether or not we have a climate action plan or not. Those things are negotiating with our utilities to try and change the source of our energy, looking for policies that you guys can incentivize individuals helping us achieve the goal. So I think there's some really great and important low-hanging fruit, but there's also some really important policy work that's going to take us a long time. So if we can start today, then we have enough time to hit your vision, which was adopted by council and created by the community, by 2040, which is really my goal in this, is knowing that we only have about 22 years. It sounds like a lot, but it's really not. And just so people know, what we're talking about is about half of the vision items that came out of the visioning process. The action items were really around climate, and would be captured through this plan and would be captured through the implementation. So it's in a way council's way of saying we're focusing on the goals that were outlined by the community. You're still going to have to help us prioritize those goals because we can't get to all 35 of them quickly, but it does give us that step forward.
And even if we didn't have a plan for something, for whatever happened and we didn't have a plan, I think we still should be doing some of these things that we're talking about, the fleet and how we can change that, the negotiations with our utilities. These things should be happening anyway, or at least I think they should.
Well, and some of them in many ways are. I mean, look at like sustainable buildings, green building standards, the solarization project. The city's already starting to buy smart cars or smarter cars, instead of, big Lincoln Town kind of whatever. I know you don't buy those. I can't think of another kind, but anyhow.
No, we did
Instead of
actually
buying
buy some of those.
Camry.
I just sold one.
What was
to be
Danny's
exact.
favorite car? What was that thing?
The Crown Vic.
Crown Vic.
He misses it.
Yeah,
but we took it away.
Yeah.
He was really upset.
So I like the way that Councilor Abma worded what he said. I didn't write it down. I wish I would have. But rather than look at, well, let's implement a climate action plan, let's work towards implementing, smart climate changes, or you used great words. I hope maybe Scott got that. I didn't.
So are you suggesting then that we defer till, like, we not be hiring anybody at this point, but we defer until January when we have a new council and we have a finished plan? I mean, is that kind of where you guys are?
Well, what I'm thinking is, Ann needs to know now, Ann and Haley need to know now, should money be put into the budget. And it seems to me after lots of conversations with folks up here and conversations with staff and one thing and another, I understand some of the mechanics of this a little better than what I might have even a couple of weeks ago. But if we were to put something in the budget now, it doesn't mean that Ann's going to go right out and hire somebody that July 1 is going to go to work. It would be after we've determined what kind of person we want based on what it is we want that person to do. And at that time, I was thinking in my mind that would be because we would have the CAP and, know what kind of direction we were going to take with that. So it could be anything that kind of sparks that, but after the CAP is completed and adopted, then it's time to get somebody in to start working on, which would be maybe September, maybe January.
So you're not averse to the creation of an FTE?
Following the cap.
Correct.
Following the adoption of the cap.
Yeah.
And just so I'm clear, what I'm hearing you say is that you want to be able to prioritize the cap and you want to be able to look at those items. You want to talk with the community. You want to understand what we're actually going to be prioritizing if we were to hire. And then we would take that, the staff would then on our side try and figure out how we fulfill those obligations with no more than an additional FTE.
I think kind of what I got from what Councilor Abma said too is that in writing the goal, it wouldn't necessarily even say the CAP in there. It would have other wording that led us towards a more sustainable community. Because it wouldn't, he's really right. It doesn't matter in the long run whether we have a cap or not. We know that we want to do some things that will help the sustainability and the environment, and which leads to lower costs, which leads to, less emissions, which leads to, all that stuff. That's kind of what I understood.
So if that's the case, I'm going to do a straw poll.
Yeah.
Let me just restate it back to you. What I'm hearing is that you would want to modify this. Yes.
Before
Please.
we move on to a straw poll, you've heard from myself, you've heard from Wilda, you've heard from Mark. I don't know if Angel and Lisa have things they'd like to add before we start.
Totally agree. What I was actually hoping you would do is tell them what you're actually, do you have words that you want to use in this? Okay. So if not, if anyone else has words that you want to use in this as we're talking about it, as we go to the other two council members, please let me know. I don't think we can vote on language tonight.
No.
I'd like to take the feedback from all of you if there's at least a 4-1 vote to proceed and come back at the next meeting with some language that accurately reflects that. So please include words that you would want to see in the language.
Yeah. And unless I'm understanding part of this incorrectly, the main thing that you want to establish sooner rather than later is, as we go into the budget process, should we be accounting for a new FTE that would take care of sustainability projects for the city of Milwaukee?
Well, and I say that because this was a very definitive deadline. We've already funded this. This is done.
Yeah, right.
So the question becomes, is there an expectation from council that there is an implementation of items out of that document as one of your goals? So if that's the reality, then I need to figure out how to provide that for you going into the new year.
Well, it does no good for us to write any kind of a plan or any kind of code or any kind of anything and then put it on a shelf. We can't do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Have language concept.
Can we hear that? I'd like.
It simply begin to implement our 2040 vision.
Our 2040 vision? Yeah. Oh, the vision plan, right.
If you do that, I would clarify because we are. So your other two goals have 12 and 7 of the action items out of the vision. So I would just clarify. Fully or around sustainability or something that sort of brings in the language about that portion of the work.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just kind of looking at things as broad-based as possible. It could be something that comes forward to us that isn't even in the vision plan, didn't even think of it. I mean, but it becomes a priority all of a sudden, and it has to do with sustainability or the environment or climate reality or whichever terminology we want to use.
Well, the quadruple bottom line, so maybe we...
I'm sorry, Angel, I couldn't...
The quadruple bottom line, so it was people, places, prosperity, planet. So would adding language around that quarter of it, would that get us a little closer?
It does, just so you know, the items for this came in every single group.
Right.
So what we discovered when we went back and we looked through which vision items required us to implement a climate strategy, they were actually in the people, the place, the prosperity, as well as within the planet.
And so the language you're trying to forge is for what?
For me to write into all your speeches. Right? Like, I literally just need to know, like, how am I describing this in the job description? How am I talking about this to the public? What if your goal is just to greatly increase our investment around climate change? That's great. Whatever it is you guys want to say is your terminology.
That
it's
works.
A question
That's
of
kind of what Shane said.
Okay.
Increase our investment around solutions for climate change?
Yeah. I mean, again, I said something to the effect of prioritizing those things that give us the biggest bang for the buck, sort of have the most impact with the resources that we have, knowing that we're going to put some more resources towards this goal. And I guess the language will come down to the resolution that I assume we're going to pass. But the little 2-word or 3-word thing that we have, like housing affordability, that's fairly broad. Milwaukee Bay,
climate change.
Climate change, very broad. So I think what we're going to get into the details and the back and forth is going to be the language of that resolution, not just climate change reduction, which is easy.
I agree with you too. Yeah.
And last time that was a discussion that a couple of you took on before we came back for the vote. And I support that. I'm happy to also try and generate language. If we want to. I mean, we still have, also for people who haven't participated in this process in the past, we've asked that it be a 4-1 or a 5-0 vote to show that a majority of council is interested in going down this path. And at this point, we've talked to 3. So I think you're right. We probably should open it up for the other 2.
Well, so are you asking us about, I guess I thought the way this conversation started, you were asking us, is this something you want in this next biennium budget.
It
You wanna
is.
fund this going forward. It's not the question of what are your 2019 goals going to be.
So here's the thing. The way I am building your budget and the commitment I made to you is that if you prioritize something as a goal, that's where we fund it.
Right.
So I can't, and we don't have a lot of extra money in Milwaukee. So I'm holding to that. You're not going to see a whole lot of things in the budget that weren't priorities here, or to be honest, priorities for a past council. You will see some things that came out of SAFE. You'll see some things that came out of the library, but most of the funding is going to be either a past city council goal or a current. And I did that to try and be authentic to you, that you guys have told us where you want to spend your time, your efforts, your money. That's where we're putting new cash. So I've already funded this one. My question was really, do you want it to be more than that? And if so, then I will fund that I'll try and find ways to
Right,
fund that.
because moving forward, once the cap is finished, nothing has been funded. The staff person hasn't been funded. No implementation of anything specific has been funded, even though, again, I want to point out, we are doing a number of sustainable kinds of things. And that's all adding to reduction of our footprint, in the end run. But for the budget purposes, that's the purpose of tonight instead of January or September or something like that.
Well, and when we set this, we thought it was a one-year goal.
Yes.
So I was going to try and have this done in time for our retreat, which would have been next week.
Right.
So it's not done. It's taken longer than we had hoped, where we've added some meetings. It took us longer to get the RFP out.
Well, as it should. It's pretty
important.
And frankly, I think we have some difficult conversations before that's done.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a good grasp of how what the city does and what the wider community and the industries are doing fits together, and how we're accounting for all that and all of that. So, I mean, I think we have some, I'll be surprised, frankly, if we're done by the end of July, I guess.
That's why I said September, right? If we were going to delay it, I said till September.
I don't think we're not going to sit here at one night and adopt it.
Right.
I just don't think that's
Well, and I
gonna
haven't
happen.
necessarily heard any specific languages around, implementing the cap. And so I think that we can get to a point where we can say tonight, I'm supportive of saying something very generally about implementing the low-hanging fruit, or however we want to eventually word it. But resourcing, climate change solutions, climate actions, more generally, and that could include an FTE after we actually see and pass the cap. I think that makes some sense, and it's general enough that you've got 5-0.
There is zero chance that after you pass the budget on July 1st, I'm going to be able to go fast enough that we are going to suddenly hire somebody and suddenly you're going to be seeing this whole different world, right? We will do this on a staged approach to make sure that everybody feels like we have given respect to the process, to the volunteers who are serving, and to all of you, and to the community who needs to engage with us. So I think that's fair, and I think it's important. As for people who don't know me, who are watching on camera, this is my background. This is the work I did for a very long time, and it is something that I feel strongly we can accomplish the low-hanging fruit. It does take effort. And my question is, you only get so much time and you only get so much effort. The 5 of you only get so much. And are you comfortable spending a third of that effort for your 3 priorities on this? And it sounds like you are, but I want to talk about that.
When you say a third of your time, the concern that I have had, and I think others share, is when you say that if we make this a goal, you will fund it. I still don't know, as I said here, if I were to say climate action reduction, if that means I'm funding 50,000 or 500 or $1 million. It's such a, so I don't know when you say I will make this a priority. I think it's still, there are going to be individual items that come before this council repeatedly in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, that we will have a discussion on those individual items. I do not want to set a goal that says climate action prioritization, and that every time something comes forward, I'm told this was a goal you set, you have to do it. Because I'm not going to do that.
So here's the secret. You haven't. You haven't done that on Milwaukee Bay Park. You haven't done that on housing. You have had robust, hard conversations when we have brought things forward. This is not a rubber stamp.
Yeah.
Right. We did.
This is staff will make sure you have regular opportunities to discuss this topic and your opportunities to influence it. You don't have to vote in favor of the things we put forward, but we will give you the opportunities to influence this because you said it's important.
Yeah, we didn't say we're going to build 500 units of affordable housing.
Right.
We didn't say we're going to make sure every person that lives in this city who's currently paying more than 30% of their income will have a house that they can afford. Our goals were not that specific. We said we're going to work on housing affordability, and that means that we're going to dedicate staff time to it. We're going to make it priorities. We're going to have meetings with partners. We're going to figure out ways. We're going to serve on bond commissions.
See where it takes us.
We're going to do the work it takes to move that project forward. We just need to have this as one of those projects that we're moving forward in every way that we can figure out to do that we can afford as a city. We're not committing to, solving climate change all by ourselves. We're saying we're going to continue to work on this, and we're going to commit.
Yeah.
And what I originally proposed was for purposes of the budget, because unfortunately that's happening before we get to the cap, at least an FTE and, whatever, a pot of money for that person to work with, $50,000 or whatever that looks like.
How much did you say? 50?
I said 50, just
that's
because.
That's kind of what I was thinking,
I know
too.
Peter needs some trees, and, we've got things that we already know we can be doing. If we had some modicum of a budget. So that's kind of where I'm at today, is just trying to get us to that point where this isn't delayed another 2 years until the next budget cycle to approve, something. By that time, we should be, assuming we have that FTE and Peter and that person and Ann have had an opportunity to work and start working with our partners, and we're out there doing the things that we do politically. In 2 years, we should know, okay, now we're ready. We know we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do this, just like we will with housing. We'll know we've
know what we can't do also.
Made $1 million in our CTE, and we're going to land bank this, and we're going to build that, and we're going to, buy down some cost on this other project so that we can get 20 affordable housing units in that. We'll have more of an idea. But without something for staff to work with now, we won't have that in 2 years. We won't be in that position on climate. We'll be at the beginning.
And Councilor Abma, just so you know, we could fill 6 people. I don't have that money.
Yeah.
And we're not bringing that forward. We're bringing forward a relatively moderate budget if we do this. And it's going to require you to prioritize. Because there is a world of things you could do, and I won't be able to accomplish them, even with the FTE. There's just no way. Right. So my commitment to you and what I'm going to ask you to do is to say, that's not actually my highest. The thing that I think you need to focus on is this policy in particular. This is where I want us spending our time for the first year. And we're going to give you options as to what this is, and that's going to come out of the CAP, which the community is developing right now, but it's also going to come out of my experience and out of Peter's experience. We just don't have the money, and we're not telling you we're going to put that in the budget, and I hope you will bring rigor to this conversation. I hope you will question us. I hope you will tell us that that's not your priority. The mayor and I, though we're both passionate about climate, we disagree on a lot of policy areas about what the highest priority is. You're going to see that in the conversations. I think that's important for you to see his perspective and mine and Peter's. Because this is going to be hard. It's going to be hard to say what's the thing we should do now. What's the thing that gets us the biggest bang today? But I'm committed to doing it. And I'm committed to having those hard conversations with you.
Well, we're lucky to have you, Peter, and the mayor with your experience. So I think that's going to be very helpful going forward. and I don't know if maybe this is a done deal, but is there any other, besides climate, is there any other options?
I mean, any other like third
Yeah,
goals?
like I don't want climate, I want X.
Okay.
Well,
I'm okay with climate, but I
mean, I do feel like it's a shame we're not having a more robust goal-setting conversation, but none of these goals are really, they're all midstream. I do think, it's not 2 years, it's really 18 months, January of 20.
9 months. I'm going to be back here with you guys. Yeah, I'm going to be back here with you January. We set the date, I think it's the 8th.
Right, yeah.
So we're going to, all of these will be back up in the air for a discussion. But looking at how we've treated past council goals that are close to accomplishment, like the library, we keep working on them, maybe not at the same intensity because they may not require it, but we keep working on these things and we add a couple more that are the priority of the new council.
So with any luck, by that time, we'll have a pretty good idea of how we're funding Milwaukee Bay Park.
Right.
And we might, that may be moving forward and in the design, and we're going to construction the next summer, and then we can say, okay, what's the next thing? Do we want to go after fiber to home? Do we want to, what's our next thing that we're going to tackle?
Isn't the county commission going to take care of that for us?
No, not all by themselves. They're looking for partners.
No.
Not yet, they're not.
Yeah.
They put everything on hold.
I mean, I think it's the right thing to do to preserve the flexibility to, to have an FTE to move this forward once all those issues are resolved.
Yeah. You mean preserve flexibility and that we fund it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like I have a 5-0 to move this forward. My ask to you is that we work on some language. Councilor Adma, you actually had a couple of specific options, and I'm wondering if you and the mayor could maybe work on a little bit. I'm happy to help too, but since you both seem to have some actual verbiage, and just CC me on the email and I'll add in my thoughts as we're able to do this, and then we can put it onto the council agenda for the April 17th meeting to get this adopted. Does that work?
Well, I would hope that others.
We will get it out for review. Yeah, but I think that this is just an initial. We need to come up with something so people can throw stuff at it. And I want to make sure I respectfully get what you guys are trying to state here today instead of just throwing out, because I've tried. I've been trying for weeks to come up with language and it hasn't worked perfectly, and I don't want to just keep throwing things at a wall. I'd like to give you guys some space to come up with your own language.
That works for me.
Okay.
Well, and if the others of us have words that we think would work, just let you guys know.
Let's
do determine whether that works or not.
Let's do a point. Yeah, don't send it to each other. So if you want to send that to me.
That's right.
And if you'd like to CC the mayor on that, just since he'll probably be taking the lead with me on it, that would be great. Okay. Anything else then on this? I really appreciate it. That went really fast. So thank you guys. I appreciated it. We do still have an executive session, but there are some closing items that you're going to want to talk about before we do that.
All right. So the first town hall for the comprehensive plan update is tomorrow, Wednesday, April 4th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Waldorf School. Free childcare and refreshments are provided. Learn more by visiting the city's homepage at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov and RSVP by sending an email to plan@milwaukeeoregon.gov. Do people need to let us know about the childcare, or is that just?
It's actually too late. So we had an RSVP for childcare, and we've officially secured people to watch the kids. So at this point, if you didn't RSVP for kids, I don't think we can accommodate you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did we have any requests for translation services? Is that?
Do you know if we had translation services requests? We don't.
I'm sorry?
We have people reserved.
We do have people reserved. Okay.
All right. There are some great events coming up this Saturday, April 7th, including the 3rd annual Dogwood Dash 5K and 1K for the kids. Both races begin at Milwaukee Bay Park and then travel south on the trolley trail. The 5K begins at 8 a.m. and the 1K begins at 9 a.m. Registration will take place in the parking lot at Harrison Street and McLaughlin Boulevard. You can register in advance or the day of. Also on Saturday the 7th, volunteers will gather at Tideman Johnson Park at 9 a.m. to clean up the park. Refreshments and work tools are provided. Another great event happening this Saturday is Repair Fair at the Wichita Center, located at 6031 Southeast King Road. This free event brings skilled volunteers and community members with broken items together to fix them. This is an issue that came up in our during our climate, one of our technical committees, and this is another great way to start to reduce, as it turns out, half of the carbon footprint of virtually any city is the stuff we buy, right? So if you think about buildings, transportation, that's half, and then the other half is the stuff we buy. So things like this repair fair, where that toaster that otherwise is going to go to the landfill and you're going to go buy a new toaster that's going to come from China and put a whole bunch of coal smoke up in the air to build that toaster, if you can get that toaster fixed, you just cut down on the carbon footprint.
Well, I can see where this fit in the people portion of the vision, because it came up when we were talking about helping our neighbors. And so
that means I can take my lamp in there and somebody will tell me whether they, oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Non-gas powered.
Yeah, anything other than small appliances.
I'm there. I am there. My favorite lamp.
And fabrics and,
anything. Wow.
Anything, yeah.
So it's at the Wichita Center, 6031 Southeast King Road.
What time?
10 a.m.
Doesn't
it's like 10
have a time.
To it says 10 a.m. on the
10
calendar.
to 10.
Yeah.
And then finally, the Letting Library will host their first Saturday concert at 2 p.m. featuring Silky Meyer and friends. You can learn about all these wonderful events happening this Saturday by visiting the city's homepage at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov. Our city manager, Ann Ober, is holding an open door event on Thursday, April 19th from 4 until 5:30 p.m. here at City Hall. If you would like to meet and talk with the city manager, please stop by. The 2018 Milwaukee Earth Day cleanup event, scheduled for Saturday, April 21st from 10 a.m. till noon at Ball Michelle Park, is seeking volunteers. All volunteers will be treated to a pizza lunch at noon to celebrate the morning's accomplishments. To learn more and to register to volunteer, visit www.milwaukeeoregon.gov/volunteering. After the Earth Day event, participate in an Arbor Day celebration from noon until 1:30 p.m. at the same location, which will include fun activities for kids, a tree giveaway, a ceremonial tree planting, and more. And that's all I have on that. Do you want to do this one?
No, go ahead. I mean, yeah, I've got a couple others, but go ahead.
So somebody want to hold it up so the camera can
hold it up. And I would say, this isn't until May 12th, so we will have additional times to tout this one. I wouldn't get into reading all the details of each one, but just a reminder for everybody that there are always Mother's Day weekend plant sales in Milwaukee, and this year is no different. There's a library plant sale. There's a
Milwaukee Garden Club, Milwaukee Museum, Friends of Letting Library, Oak Lodge Garden Club, and the Ardenwald NDA.
Yeah, and those latter two are actually the next weekend, so this flyer's a little bit confusing, but anyway, just be prepared for the Saturday of Mother's Day weekend. There's always plant sales in Milwaukee, and this year is no exception.
And we had something else.
Yeah, two things for the, one of my assignments as a counselor is to be the liaison to the North Clackamas Urban Watersheds Council, and you may have heard that abbreviated as NICKY-WIC. NICKY-WIC is responsible for watersheds. So there's Johnson Creek on our northern edge has its own watershed council. NICKY-WIC is responsible for other creeks between Johnson Creek and the Clackamas River. So it includes Milwaukee, but it also includes a lot of the unincorporated county. But it includes Kellogg Creek and Mount Scott Creek here in Milwaukee. So the two watershed councils are getting together on, unfortunately, the night of our next council meeting, April 17th, to do they do a sort of a few times a year what they call science talks in a pub or in a bar, where they come in at, it's 6:30 and people come in and order a beer and they talk about a science topic. So this one coming up on the 17th is called, oh shoot, I had it on my phone, Rain in an Urban Jungle, Pollution, Flooding, and Erosion. And so it's going to be talking about, stormwater swales and ways to improve your property to deal with those issues, pollution, flooding, and erosion. And I know those are issues I've talked to lots of people in town about. So, I think there are plenty of people who are interested in rain gardens and other things. And so that's going to be a great free event at Libby's on Main Street at 6:30 on April 17th. And it's free, but they do ask you to RSVP. So if you go on either the Johnson Creek Watershed Council or the North Clackamas Urban Watershed Council, it's on both their websites and their Facebook pages, an invitation so you can RSVP. The other thing is that the Nikiwik is having their first annual fundraising dinner on Saturday, April 28th. And this is a big step for them. They're a relatively new organization, and so it's a big step for them to do a dinner like this. And I do plan to attend, and I would encourage other people who are interested in the health of the Kellogg Creek watershed to attend and show their support for Nikiwik.
Yeah, they've really stepped up partnering with us on working to remove Kellogg Dam. They've put a lot of time and effort into that, so it would be great. Anybody who's interested in seeing that happen, supporting that watershed council will help move that forward.
I apologize if there is a library open house coming up, and I'm not sure.
Oh, that wasn't on there.
It wasn't on, and I don't think it's on our calendar either. So I'm just trying to.
24th?
I think it is the 24th, but I was just trying to find it in my notes.
It's not on the city's calendar? That's not good.
I wish I had it. I don't.
I'm fairly certain it's April 24th. It's a library design open house to go over this and get any additional feedback. So.
All right, anything else? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Well, give me a second first, before we do that.
Oh, yeah.
After we adjourn the regular session, we will be going into executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statute ORS 192.6602E to deliberate with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. Now I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.